What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm feeling a little bit limp right now. I just got out of seeing Ari Aster's new horror film, Midsommar. And to start, I'll simply say, if you've been looking forward to this movie, you're going to get everything you want and more. And don't worry, I won't breathe a word about what happens until I give you fair warning. I don't even know if calling it a horror movie does it justice. It's more like this hauntingly beautiful fairy tale disguised as a breakup movie, one that I can see shooting to the top of a lot of people's top 10 list for the year. My biggest concern going into this movie was whether or not writer-director Ari Aster would fall victim to the classic sophomore slump. We've seen that phenomenon play out many times over with novelists, musicians, and definitely filmmakers. I thought Hereditary was one of the strongest films of 2018, even though I totally get that it was overhyped by a lot of people and not necessarily everyone's cup of tea. Critics and reviewers need to get out of the habit of calling every new horror movie the greatest horror movie of all time. Just say it's a damn good horror movie and leave it at that. But I recognize that with Hereditary, the film bored some people senseless, so much so that it took me a long time to even take a chance on the movie and come around on it. However, when I saw it, for me, it immediately announced the arrival of a major new filmmaking talent. And then seeing Midsommar tonight has only confirmed that first impression I had. I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce it just Midsommar or Midsommar. I'm sure I'm getting it wrong. I'm going to say Midsommar, but if I'm saying that incorrectly, I apologize. More importantly, if you're a moviegoer, but you're tired of only having the option to see franchises geared toward the broadest possible audience, Midsommar will remind you that film is not dead after all, in spite of so much evidence of its impending doom, because this movie is a transportive, hypnotic experience of style and mood, one that basically left me in a horrified trance for much of the film, at least when I wasn't cackling wildly at the exquisite gallows humor. The best way I can describe it is think of the emotions and the dawning horror of the last few minutes of Rosemary's Baby, or better still, the last few minutes of The Wicker Man. And then imagine a filmmaker finding a way to sustain that intensity like a python taking its time, squeezing and swallowing you for well over an hour. Perhaps the movie reaches its emotional peak a little prematurely, about 15 minutes before the end of the film, or perhaps I was just completely drained and had no emotions left to give. But when this film ended, I was sprawled out in my chair like a giant starfish with my food and drink totally ignored at my side in a state of total satisfaction. And with so many movies these days choosing to offer safe, risk-averse, family-friendly experiences, I find myself increasingly looking to television and books to get the storytelling experiences that I crave. But tonight, I just got to enjoy being a movie lover again, and for that, I am truly grateful. So I'm about to dig into some of the completely deranged story ingredients, so if you want to get the full experience, it's time for you to bail out now. But if you're still with me, I'm assuming you've either seen the trailer and want to know more, or you've seen the movie. But at this point, you probably already know the gist of the story, where a young couple that's drifting apart takes a trip with their friends to a very rural and remote part of Sweden in order to take part in a summer festival that only takes place every 90 years. Obviously, it wouldn't be much of a horror movie if everyone just had a fine time and went home afterwards. But what's great is how this movie deliberately flies in the face of nearly every horror convention you can think of. Most horror movies are incredibly dark and take place at night, but this film is overflowing with sunshine and light round the clock. Other horror films feature villains and threats that seek to do harm to the characters, but Midsommar, it features the nicest, most polite people imaginable who invite the characters to eat and dance and make love and take hallucinogenic drugs. They're the most inviting people you've ever seen, and making the story even more unsettling is how incredibly envious the locals are of the privilege of being on the receiving end of each and every atrocity the central characters experience. In their eyes, it's an honor, because after all, this is a festival celebrating the endless cycles of life and birth and renewal. It's only as we discover details of the various rituals that the horrors for the viewer truly begin to unfold. The whole movie makes this giant pivot about halfway through, where suddenly the really unusual but kind of humorous ceremonies take this incredibly gory turn when we see two of the village elders hurling themselves from a cliff to be dashed upon the rocks below in the most gruesome way imaginable. But no one makes them do this. The people of this community look forward to the same opportunity when they come of age in order to spare them the indignities of the aging process. And from that point onward, the movie really finds another gear and just becomes this insanely overwhelming but very cool and very powerful horror experience. The character of Danny, played by Florence Pugh, easily has the most interesting arc. I first saw her in The Outlaw King, and I'm rapidly becoming a big fan. But the rest of the cast does a great job as well. Initially, I was kind of in the corner of her boyfriend Christian, but I turned on him over the course of the movie. He's the type of passive-aggressive, selfish prick that I've encountered far too often. In the story, one of Christian's closest friends discovers that Christian's stealing his ideas and his work for his thesis, yet Christian's the kind of person who tries to behave as if he's the injured party if you call him out on his bad behavior. So I started actively rooting for the most horrific demise imaginable, which he receives and then some. After being drugged and seduced into this incredible mating ritual where he's surrounded by naked old ladies singing his way to procreation, they drug him even further and dress him as a sacrificial bear before burning him alive. I guess that'll show him. But quick side note, New York audiences at movies can be terrible in general, but tonight they were absolutely perfect as they joined me screaming in laughter at Christian's various reactions as he encounters one horror after another running around the camp completely naked. The drug effects in this movie were particularly good. Most movies get hallucinatory experiences completely wrong and basically take them to crazy extremes where the characters will see unicorns dancing on rainbows. But in Midsommar, it's much more subtle. From the point of view of somebody who's under the influence, the eyes of the characters around them will kind of sort of just vaguely bulge and shift. The plants around them will seem to be breathing and moving visibly. And as the movie continues, that becomes more and more the default state for all the characters. It just adds this incredibly hallucinatory atmosphere to the proceedings overall. Will Coulter, who's another actor I'm becoming a massive fan of, he's particularly funny as Mark, who's basically taking every drug he can get his hands on. But when he starts to notice the sounds of screams coming from the woods, all it takes is a little whiff of possible poontang, and he's immediately completely distracted, and he's basically led away by the nose to this horrible grisly fate of being skinned alive. But what will demand a second viewing is the care and attention to detail this film employs when it comes to the local folklore and rituals. As we come to learn, the sacred text of this community, it's a living, breathing thing that's always changing and growing in length, courtesy of these oracles that they have that have been very carefully inbred in order to free them of the concerns that most people suffer from. But what's cool is that every inch of their buildings, they're covered with these illustrations of spells and rituals, like one where a woman can use her pubic hair and food in order to successfully seduce an unsuspecting man. But all this rich detail gives the movie tremendous depth, and I think that's going to make the movie very rewarding upon multiple viewings. So Midsommar is definitely going to end up on my top 10 movies of the year, and most likely my top 5. I am all in on the Ari Aster hype train. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, and I can't wait to see what he does next. In interviews, he stated that he's going to take a break from horror, but that he would love to tackle some other genres. He claims he has 4 or 5 finished scripts ready to go, one of which is a musical, but whatever movie he chooses to make next, I will be first in line. At any rate, if you want to talk more about horror or this movie or whatever, you can always find me on Twitter at Colbrax. If you like this review, please consider giving the video a like and the channel subscribe. I would really appreciate it. But I hope everyone has an amazing 4th of July weekend. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.